Nobody from my family showed up to my wife's funeral, not even my own son and his wife. They were too busy celebrating their lavish wedding, laughing, "She's already gone. Why should we cancel our big day?" I buried her alone. But the moment the service ended, my phone went insane with messages. "Dad, what have you done?" 47 missed calls in under 20 minutes. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. My name is Homer Coleman. I'm 67 years old, and I've spent the last 35 years of my life in Austin, Texas, working as a notary and building Coleman Realty Group from the ground up. I always believed that family was everything, that blood was thicker than water, that you protect your own, no matter what. Funny how life has a way of teaching you that sometimes blood just makes a bigger mess when things fall apart. The call came early in the morning. My wife had passed away peacefully in her sleep after a long battle with cancer. 42 years of marriage, gone in a heartbeat. The doctors said it was a blessing she didn't suffer at the end. But when you lose the person who knew every corner of your soul, there's no such thing as a blessing. There's just emptiness. My son Jason is 34 years old. He's a financial consultant, the kind who wears expensive suits and talks about market opportunities over brunch. He wasn't always like this. I remember when he was 7, running to meet me at the door after work, his face covered in chocolate from sneaking cookies before dinner. I remember teaching him to ride a bike in our driveway, his mother watching from the porch with that smile that could light up the darkest room. But that was before Ashley Stewart entered his life 4 years ago. Ashley is beautiful in the way a diamond is beautiful, cold, hard, and expensive. She's 31, comes from money, and has never worked a day in her life unless you count managing social media accounts, showcasing her lifestyle. Her father, Richard Stewart, owns a chain of luxury car dealerships across Texas. Her mother, Patricia, lunches with the Austin elite and treats anyone below her tax bracket like furniture. From the moment Jason introduced Ashley to us, I saw what she was. My wife saw it too. We didn't say anything because we wanted Jason to be happy, and he seemed genuinely in love. The change was gradual, like watching paint peel. First, Jason stopped coming to family dinners. Then he moved into our house, my house, the one I'd paid off after 3 decades of work, claiming he needed to save for the wedding. Ashley moved in 2 months later, uninvited but unbothered. They took over the master bedroom on the 2nd floor, pushing my wife and me into the smaller guest room downstairs because the stairs were too hard on Mom's knees. My wife never complained. She just squeezed my hand and said, "It's fine, Homer. They're young." But it wasn't fine. Nothing about it was fine. I called Jason the day after his mother passed. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice distant. "Hey, Dad, I heard. Look, I'm really sorry, but Ashley and I are in the middle of something. Your mother died, Jason. I know, it's terrible. We'll talk later, okay?" He hung up, just like that. No questions about arrangements, no offer to help, no tears, nothing. Ashley didn't call at all. 3 days passed before I saw them in person. They came downstairs for breakfast while I was planning the funeral in the kitchen, surrounded by papers and phone numbers for florists and cemetery plots. Ashley breezed in wearing white linen, looking like she'd stepped out of a resort commercial. "Morning, Homer," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Is there coffee?" Jason followed, scrolling through his phone. He barely glanced at me. "Hey, Dad, you look tired." I stared at him, at this stranger wearing my son's face. "I'm arranging your mother's funeral." "Right, yeah." He nodded absently. "Listen, we need to talk about dates." Something in his tone made my stomach drop. "What about dates?" Ashley turned from the coffee maker, her smile perfectly practiced. "Our wedding is scheduled for March 29th. We've had this date booked for 8 months, Homer. The venue, the caterers, the photographer, everything's locked in. We've already sent out invitations to 200 people. I felt the room tilt. "March 29th is when I'm planning the funeral." Jason finally looked up from his phone. "Can't you move it? Maybe earlier in the week? Move your mother's funeral?" My voice sounded strange, even to my own ears. Hollow. Ashley set down her coffee cup with a delicate clink. "Jason and I talked about this. We understand this is hard for you, but Homer, she's already gone. Moving our wedding would cost us nearly $340,000 in deposits and cancellation fees. And honestly, what difference does a few days make? She won't know. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at Jason, waiting for him to correct her, to stand up, to be the son I raised. He shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. "You're not coming to your mother's funeral," I said slowly, making sure I understood. "It's not that we don't want to," Jason said quickly. "It's just the timing is really bad. Everyone's flying in from out of state. Ashley's parents spent a fortune on this wedding. We can't just cancel." Ashley stepped closer, her perfume overwhelming in the small kitchen. "You understand, don't you, Homer? You're a businessman. You know about sunk costs and commitments. This is our special day." Mom would have wanted Jason to be happy. "Don't invoke her name. Don't you dare use her to justify this." But I didn't say that. Instead, I heard myself ask, "What about moving the wedding, even by 1 week?" Ashley's face hardened for just a second before the smile returned. "The Lakeway Resort doesn't have another opening for 6 months. And frankly, we're not waiting that long. We've already waited 4 years. Jason put his phone in his pocket, looking relieved the conversation was almost over. "Look, we'll visit her grave afterward. We'll bring flowers. We'll make it special. But Dad, you have to understand our position here." I understood perfectly. I understood that I had raised a son who valued a party more than his mother's memory. I understood that the woman he chose to marry had turned him into someone I no longer recognized. And I understood, with crushing clarity, that I was completely alone in this house that suddenly felt like a mausoleum. "Get out," I said quietly. Jason blinked. "What?" "Get out of my kitchen, both of you." Ashley's mask slipped entirely. "Excuse me. This is our home too, Homer. In fact, once you—" She stopped herself, but we all knew how that sentence ended. "Once you're gone, this will be ours." That's when I saw it. The barely concealed eagerness in her eyes. The impatience. They weren't grieving my wife's death. They were waiting for mine. They were counting down the days until they could file the inheritance papers and turn this house into their personal showcase. Jason moved toward me, his hand outstretched. "Dad, Ashley didn't mean—" "I know exactly what she meant." I stood up, gathering my funeral planning papers. "You're right about one thing, Jason. Your mother is gone. But she was the only thing keeping this family together. Now there's nothing left to protect." I walked out of the kitchen, leaving them standing there in expensive clothes and cheaper values. Behind me, I heard Ashley whisper urgently to Jason, but I didn't care anymore. I climbed the stairs to my small bedroom, the one I'd been relegated to like a guest in my own home, and sat on the edge of the bed. My wife's reading glasses were still on the nightstand. Her book, bookmark at page 237, waiting for her to return. Her sweater hung over the chair, still holding the shape of her shoulders. And I realized that when I buried my wife, I'd be burying her alone. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jason's face, not the cold, dismissive mask he'd worn in the kitchen, but the round-cheeked boy who used to climb into our bed during thunderstorms, burrowing between his mother and me, whispering, "I'm not scared. I just wanted to make sure you guys were okay." I remembered his high school graduation. He'd spotted us in the crowd and grinned, pointing at us like we were celebrities. Afterward, he'd hugged his mother so tight, she laughed and said, "Jason, honey, I can't breathe." He'd looked at her with such pure love and said, "You're the best mom in the world. I'm going to make you proud, I promise." When did that promise break? At what exact moment did my son become a stranger? I walked downstairs around 3 a.m, my joints aching, my head pounding. The house was dark and silent. Jason and Ashley's bedroom door was closed, and I could see light underneath, probably scrolling through wedding Pinterest boards while planning how to redecorate once I was gone. The realization hit me in the dark hallway. They were waiting for me to die. I'd known it for months, but refused to acknowledge it. 6 months ago, I'd come home early from the office to grab documents I'd forgotten. The house was supposed to be empty. Jason and Ashley had said they were viewing wedding venues. But I heard voices coming from the living room, laughing voices. I'd stood in the foyer, hidden by the wall, and listened. Honestly, I don't know how much longer I can take living here, Ashley had said. Your dad is so outdated. The wallpaper, the furniture, all of it screams 1985. The first thing we're doing is gutting this entire place. The second we inherit, we're renovating everything, Jason agreed. New kitchen, open concept, maybe knock out that wall there. We could turn his office into a wine cellar. What about the business? Coleman Realty? We'll sell it. The name's worth something, and with that money plus the house value, we're looking at close to $1.2 million. Ashley had giggled. Your mom better leave us alone to manage everything. I don't want her trying to maintain control from the grave with some trust fund nonsense. They'd laughed together, actually laughed. I'd left the house silently and sat in my car for an hour, trying to convince myself I'd misheard. But I hadn't. And now, months later, with my wife dead and her funeral scheduled on their wedding day, I finally understood. I was nothing to them but an obstacle, a name on a deed, a signature away from their dream life. I stood in my home office, surrounded by 35 years of carefully organized files. As a notary, I'd built my career on understanding the law, on knowing how documents could protect or destroy lives with a single signature. I'd helped hundreds of people transfer property, establish trusts, protect their assets. I'd always been meticulous, thorough, precise. And now, in the darkness, staring at my filing cabinets full of deeds and wills and contracts, I realized something. I still had time. I had 3 weeks until the funeral. 3 weeks until they celebrated their wedding while I buried my wife alone. 3 weeks to make sure they got exactly what they deserved. Nothing. I pulled out the files. Property deed for 2,847 Westlake Drive. My house, valued at $890,000. Articles of incorporation for Coleman Realty Group. My will, naming Jason as sole beneficiary. Bank statements showing joint accounts. Everything organized, everything ready to transfer smoothly to my son upon my death. Texas law is interesting when you really study it. Most people think estate planning only happens after death, but that's not true. A living person has absolute authority to transfer assets, create irrevocable trusts, and restructure ownership during their lifetime. The key word, irrevocable. Once signed, once notarized, once filed, it's done. No court can undo it. No lawyer can challenge it. Because I'm not dead, I'm very much alive, and I have every legal right to decide what happens to my money, my property, my life's work. My hands didn't shake as I began taking notes. Years of practice had taught me to compartmentalize emotion when working with documents. This was just another case file, just another client who needed protection from greedy relatives. Except this time, the client was me. I remembered something my wife had said about 2 years ago when we'd first noticed Jason changing. We'd been sitting in this very office, and she'd touched my hand gently. Homer, maybe we should update the will, add some protections, a trust or something. He's our son, I'd said firmly. We trust him. She'd looked at me with those knowing eyes. I trust the boy he was. I'm not sure about the man he's becoming. I dismissed her concerns, told her she was worrying too much, that Jason was just going through a phase, that marriage would settle him down, that once they had kids, he'd remember what family really meant. I'd been wrong, she'd been right, and now she was gone, and I was alone with the consequences of my blind faith in blood relations. The sky was starting to lighten outside my office window when I finally leaned back in my chair. My notepad was filled with legal terminology, statute numbers, procedural requirements. The outline of a plan was forming, elegant, airtight, and absolutely devastating. If Jason wanted to celebrate on the day of his mother's funeral, fine. Let him have his party. Let him dance and drink expensive champagne and pose for Instagram photos with his calculating bride. But when the music stopped, when the last guest went home, when he finally bothered to check his phone, he'd discover that everything he'd been counting on, everything he'd been waiting for, every penny in property and promise of inheritance, had vanished like smoke. Not through death, through life, through my life, my decisions, my legally binding right to protect what I'd built from those who saw it as nothing more than their future playground. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts, until I found the name I needed. Robert Mitchell, the estate attorney I'd worked with for 8 years. Professional, thorough, and most importantly, available for an emergency consultation. My finger hovered over the call button as the sun finally broke over the Austin skyline, painting my office in shades of gold and amber. Somewhere upstairs, Jason and Ashley were sleeping peacefully in the master bedroom they'd claimed, dreaming of their wedding day and their inheritance windfall. They had no idea the ground was about to shift beneath them. I pressed call. The phone rang once, twice. "Homer?" Robert's voice was groggy but concerned. "It's 6 in the morning. Is everything okay?" I looked at the files spread across my desk, at the notes I'd taken, at the plan I'd carefully constructed in the darkness. Outside, Austin was waking up to another beautiful Texas morning. Inside, I was waking up to something else entirely. Clarity. "Robert, I need to see you today. This morning, if possible. I need to create an irrevocable charitable trust, transfer property ownership, and restructure my entire estate. And I need it done before March 29th. There was a long pause. "That's 3 weeks away." "I'm aware." "Homer, this is about your wife's funeral, isn't it? And Jason's wedding?" "Yes." Another pause, longer this time. "I'll clear my schedule. Come to my office at 9. And Homer, bring every document you have. If we're doing this, we're doing it right." I hung up and sat in the growing light, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Purpose. My wife was gone, and I couldn't change that. My son had chosen his path, and I couldn't change that either. But I could change what happened next. They wanted a wedding on the day of the funeral. They'd get their wedding. They'd get their party and their photographs and their expensive celebration. And then they'd get the bill for their choices. Not in money, though they'd lose plenty of that, but in understanding. In the cold, crushing realization that actions have consequences, that family means nothing if you're only interested in the inheritance, and that the old man they'd dismissed as a pushover had spent 35 years learning exactly how to make documents say what he wanted them to say. I gathered my files and prepared for my meeting with Robert. As I did, I caught sight of myself in the office mirror. I looked older, more tired, but something else too. Harder, more focused. "I'm sorry," I whispered to my wife's memory, "but I have to do this." The house creaked as Jason and Ashley began moving around upstairs. I could hear Ashley's voice, bright and cheerful. "We should finalize the seating chart today," I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Let them plan their perfect wedding. Let them imagine their perfect future in my house, spending my money, erasing every trace of the family that built it. They'd learn soon enough. The wedding was coming. But so was Judgment Day. Robert Mitchell's office occupied the 6th floor of the Frostbank Tower, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Austin. I'd been here dozens of times over the past 8 years, usually for straightforward estate matters, updating a will, notarizing documents, filing paperwork, but this morning felt different. This morning I wasn't here as a colleague consulting another professional. I was here as a man who'd finally stopped playing the victim. Robert looked up when his secretary showed me in. He was 52, still sharp despite the early hour, his suit jacket already on even though the sun had barely cleared the horizon. His eyes moved from my face to the banker's box I carried, filled with every document related to my assets. "Homer," he said carefully. "Sit down. Coffee?" "No, thank you." I set the box on his conference table. "We have a lot of work to do." He studied me for a moment, and I saw recognition dawn in his eyes. He'd seen this transformation before, the moment when a person stops asking for fairness and starts demanding justice. "Tell me everything." So I did. I told him about the conversation in the kitchen, about Ashley's cold calculation, about Jason's silence. I told him about the overheard conversation 6 months ago, about how they viewed me as nothing more than an inconvenient barrier to their inheritance. And I told him about the wedding, scheduled for the same day as my wife's funeral. When I finished, Robert leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Then he said quietly, "Homer, are you sure about this? Jason is your only son." The words hung in the air between us. I'd been waiting for this question, had prepared myself for it during the sleepless night, but hearing it out loud still stung. I had a son, I said, my voice cold and level. Now I have an heir who's counting down the days until my funeral. There's a difference. Robert nodded slowly. All right. Then let's make sure we do this properly. What exactly do you want? I pulled out my notepad, filled with annotations and references to Texas property law. I want to create an irrevocable charitable foundation, the Coleman Family Charitable Foundation. I transfer all assets, the house, the business, my savings, into the foundation. I become the lifetime trustee, maintaining complete control while I'm alive. Upon my death, everything goes to charity. Jason gets $50,000 cash, nothing more. That's thorough. Robert tapped his pen against his desk. And legally sound. Texas law is very clear about a person's right to dispose of their property during their lifetime. But Homer, you understand what you're doing here? This isn't just changing a will. This is burning the bridge entirely. The bridge burned the moment they chose a wedding over a funeral. Robert pulled out a legal pad and began making notes. We'll need to file articles of incorporation for the foundation, establish bylaws, open a bank account in the foundation's name, transfer the deed through a quitclaim deed, restructure the business ownership, draft a new will. He looked up. This is going to take time. At least 2 weeks, probably 3 if we do it right. We have 3 weeks until the funeral. I leaned forward. And Robert? It has to be airtight. No loopholes, no grounds for contest. When Jason tries to challenge this, and he will, I want every judge in Texas to laugh him out of the courtroom. A ghost of a smile crossed Robert's face. You know, in all the years I've known you, I've never seen you like this. You've never seen me betrayed by my own son before. He nodded, understanding. All right, let me pull up the foundation templates. We'll start with the Articles of Incorporation. The foundation's mission statement. Have you thought about what you want it to support? I hadn't, actually. I'd been so focused on the mechanics of transferring assets that I hadn't considered what the foundation would actually do. Then it hit me. Cancer support, families dealing with cancer, treatment assistance, hospice care, support services. Like my wife had needed, like the families who would attend her funeral, the real mourners, understood. Robert typed for a moment, then turned his screen toward me. Something like this. The Coleman Family Charitable Foundation is dedicated to providing financial and emotional support to families affected by cancer, honoring the memory of those who have fought this disease with courage and dignity. I read it twice. It was perfect. My wife would have loved it. Jason would hate it. Yes, exactly that. We worked through the morning, breaking only when Robert's secretary brought lunch neither of us touched. The legal documents began to take shape, pages and pages of carefully worded clauses, each one a nail in Jason's inheritance coffin. The foundation would own everything. The house at 2847 Westlake Drive, the business I'd built over 35 years, the bank accounts I'd filled through decades of careful saving. All of it, wrapped in legal protection so tight that not even the best attorney could unravel it. Now here's the critical part, Robert said, as afternoon shadows lengthened across his office. Every single document must be signed, notarized, and filed before your wife's funeral. Once you're gone, even temporarily unreachable, Jason could argue you were under duress or not, of sound mind. But if we complete everything now, while you're clearly healthy and competent, while witnesses can attest to your mental state, he shrugged, it becomes unassailable. How many witnesses do we need? For this level of asset transfer, at least 2, preferably 3. People who can testify you were acting of your own free will, that you understood what you were doing, that no one was coercing you. I thought about my small circle of friends. Most had drifted away over the years, especially after my wife got sick. But there were a few I could trust. What about you? Can you be a witness? I'll be one, yes, but we need others. Preferably people who know you well enough to speak to your character, but aren't beneficiaries of the foundation. The funeral director, Carol Harris, came to mind. She'd known my wife for years, had seen firsthand how Jason and Ashley had abandoned us, and my banker at Austin First Bank, Virginia Porter, professional, discreet, capable of testifying that I was handling complex financial transactions with perfect clarity. I can get 2 more. I said. Robert nodded, satisfied. Good. Now let's talk timeline. Today is, he checked his calendar, the 9th. The funeral is on the 29th. That gives us 20 days. Here's what we need to accomplish. He laid out the plan methodically. File the foundation paperwork within the next 3 days. Open the foundation bank account by the end of the week. Begin transferring assets starting the following Monday. File the quitclaim deed for the house. Restructure the business ownership. Draft and execute the new will. Each step had to happen in perfect sequence, each document building on the previous one, creating an interlocking structure that couldn't be dismantled. One more thing, Robert said as we finished. Jason can't know about any of this. The moment he suspects, he might try to interfere. Get a conservatorship order. Claim you're mentally incompetent. Something. We need him completely unaware until everything is filed and finalized. I thought about Jason and Ashley upstairs, surrounded by wedding magazines and seating charts, oblivious to everything happening around them. He won't notice. They're too busy planning their party. Good, keep it that way. Robert stood, extending his hand. We'll start tomorrow. I'll have the first set of documents ready for your signature by noon. And Homer? What you're doing. It's harsh. But it's not wrong. Sometimes people need to learn that actions have consequences. I shook his hand, feeling the weight of what we'd set in motion. When I'd woken up this morning, I'd still been the grieving widower, the dismissed father, the man everyone expected to simply accept his fate. But now, sitting in Robert's office with the outline of my plan spread across the conference table, I felt something else. Power, control, purpose. I wasn't the victim anymore. I gathered my documents and headed for the elevator, my mind already moving to the next steps. I needed to call Carol Harris at the funeral home, establish exactly when we could finalize the last documents. I needed to schedule a meeting with Virginia Porter to discuss the financial transfers. I needed to ensure every piece fell into place with mathematical precision. The elevator doors opened on the ground floor, and I stepped out into the lobby. Through the windows, I could see Austin going about its business. People rushing to meetings, tourists taking photos, life continuing as if nothing had changed, but everything had changed. I walked to my car, unlocked it, and sat behind the wheel for a moment before starting the engine. My phone buzzed, a text from Ashley. Homer, can you pick up champagne for the engagement party Friday? Something expensive. The Stewarts are coming. Thychicks. I stared at the message. The casual entitlement. The assumption I'd jump to serve their needs while they ignored mine. The complete absence of any acknowledgement of what I was going through. I typed back, of course, then added a champagne emoji, just to really sell it. Let them have their engagement party. Let them celebrate and toast and feel confident in their future. Every moment they spent in blissful ignorance was another moment I spent building the trap that would close around them. I started the car and pulled out of the parking garage. As I drove home through the Austin streets, I found myself almost looking forward to the next few weeks. Not because I enjoyed what I was doing. There was no joy in destroying your son's expectations, but because for the first time since my wife died, I felt like I had control over something. They'd made their choice. Now they'd live with mine. The next morning, I returned to Robert's office and signed the first set of documents. Articles of incorporation for the Coleman Family Charitable Foundation. Bylaws establishing me as lifetime trustee. Board structure, just me, with authority to appoint additional members at my discretion. The foundation's mission statement, honoring my wife's memory while ensuring Jason would never profit from it. Robert notarized each signature, his seal pressing into the paper with satisfying finality. These will be filed with the Texas Secretary of State today. By tomorrow afternoon, the Coleman Family Charitable Foundation will legally exist. How long until we can start transferring assets? We need the foundation's federal tax ID number first. That'll take a few days, but we can start preparing the other documents now. He pulled out another stack of papers. The quitclaim deed for the house. This one's critical. It transfers ownership from you personally to the foundation. Once filed with the county recorder's office, the house is no longer yours to pass on to anyone. I picked up the document, reading through the legal language. To have and to hold the premises herein, granted unto the said Coleman Family Charitable Foundation, its successors and assigns forever. Forever. Such a final word. Sign here, Robert indicated, an initial here, here, and here. My pen moved across the paper, each signature another step toward justice. Or revenge. Maybe they were the same thing. Over the next week, I fell into a rhythm. Mornings at the office, working through the usual real estate transactions, maintaining the appearance of normalcy. Afternoons with Robert, signing documents, structuring the foundation, building the legal framework that would protect everything I'd built from the vultures circling overhead. And evenings at home, watching Jason and Ashley plan their wedding with an enthusiasm that would have been touching if it weren't so grotesque. I'd started noticing things I'd previously ignored, small things that suddenly seemed enormous, like how Ashley never once asked how I was doing. Not a single, "Are you okay?" or "This must be so hard." Just demands disguised as requests. "Homer, can you move your car? The caterer needs that spot." "Homer, we need the master bathroom this weekend for the makeup trial." "Homer, could you maybe spend Saturday at your office? We're having our wedding party over for champagne." Or how Jason had started referring to the house as ours in conversations with vendors. "We're renovating the kitchen after the honeymoon. Our living room gets beautiful afternoon light," as if I'd already died and signed the deed over. One evening I was in my small bedroom, the guest room they'd relegated me to, when I overheard them talking in the hallway. "Do you think he'll actually move out after the wedding?" Ashley asked. "He'll have to," Jason replied. "We can't raise kids with him hovering around. Besides, once we inherit, we can set him up in one of those nice retirement communities, the ones with activities and stuff. God, that would be perfect. Then we'd have the whole house to ourselves." "Exactly. And honestly, at his age, it's probably better for him. More social interaction, medical care on site. It's really the responsible thing to do." They were planning my life like I was a piece of furniture to be stored. The worst part? Jason actually believed he was being considerate. I didn't confront them. What would be the point? Instead, I made a note to accelerate the timeline with Robert. Several days after my first meeting with Robert, I met with Virginia Porter, my personal banker at Austin First Bank. Virginia was 45, precise, and refreshingly discreet. I'd worked with her for 12 years. Through business expansions and personal investments, she knew every detail of my finances. "Mr. Coleman," she said, closing her office door, "I was so sorry to hear about your wife." "Thank you, Virginia." I set my briefcase on her desk. "I need to make some significant changes to my accounts." Her professional mask slipped just slightly. "Changes?" I explained what I needed. "Close the joint account I shared with Jason, the one where I'd stupidly added him as a co-owner 3 years ago, giving them access to $45,000 of my money. Transfer $680,000 from my personal savings into the new foundation account. Restructure my business accounts to reflect the new ownership structure." Virginia listened without interrupting, her fingers flying across her keyboard as she took notes. When I finished, she looked at me carefully. "Mr. Coleman, these are substantial changes. Are you certain?" "Completely certain. And your son, Jason, is still listed as beneficiary on several of these accounts. When we make these changes, those designations will be removed. He'll be notified. Not if we transfer everything before the notifications go out." I pulled out the timeline Robert and I had created. "If we execute all transfers on the same day, the notifications won't hit his email until after everything's complete. By the time he realizes what's happened, it'll be too late to stop it." Virginia studied the timeline, then studied me. I could see her putting the pieces together. The wife's recent death, the son being cut out of the accounts, the urgency of the timing. She was smart enough to understand what was happening without needing it spelled out. "When do you want to execute?" she asked. 4 days before the funeral. We'll transfer everything in one coordinated effort. House deed, bank accounts, business ownership, all of it." I leaned forward. "Virginia, I need this to be perfect. No delays, no errors, no second chances." She nodded slowly. "I'll prepare everything. We'll schedule a morning appointment that day. Bring photo ID and all relevant account numbers. The transfers will be instantaneous, but the notifications will be batched for end of business. That gives you about 8 hours before your son knows anything's changed." 8 hours is plenty. As I left the bank, my phone buzzed. Jason, "Hey, Dad. Ashley and I are meeting her parents for dinner tonight. We told them you'd pick up the check since you couldn't make it. Cool?" I hadn't known about the dinner, hadn't been invited, but apparently I was expected to pay for it. I texted back, "Sure," then made a note of the amount I'd give him. It would be the last money he'd ever get from me. The wedding preparations intensified as the date approached. Every evening I'd come home to find the house transformed. Fabric samples draped over furniture, flower arrangements covering the dining table, Ashley's shrill voice directing deliveries like a battlefield commander. "No, no, the peonies go in the east room. The roses are for the foyer. Don't you people understand basic directions?" I'd slip past them to my bedroom, to my office, to my workshop in the garage. That's where I spent most of my time now. In the small woodworking space I'd set up years ago, I was building a box, carefully sanding and finishing each piece of cherry wood. My wife had loved cherry wood, said it reminded her of her grandmother's dining table. Late one night, nearly 2 weeks after my first meeting with Robert, Jason found me there. "Dad?" He knocked on the workshop door, his voice tentative. "You got a minute?" I looked up from the box I was building. "What do you need, Jason?" He stepped inside, looking uncomfortable in the dusty space. When was the last time he'd been in here? Years, probably. I wanted to check in. You've been really quiet lately. Are you okay?" The concern in his voice almost sounded genuine. Almost, but I'd heard him in the hallway, planning to ship me off to a retirement community. I'd seen him scrolling through his phone at his mother's funeral arrangements. I knew what this was. Guilt management. "I'm fine," I said, returning to my sounding. "Just keeping busy." "Right. Good." He shifted his weight. "Listen, I know things have been tense, with the wedding and everything, but after it's over, maybe we could talk. About the future and stuff." "The future?" "Our future," he meant. The one where I signed everything over and disappeared into managed care while he and Ashley gutted my home. "Sure, Jason, after the wedding." I looked at him directly. "We'll definitely need to talk about the future." He smiled, relieved. "Great. Okay. Well, I'll let you get back to—" He gestured vaguely at my woodworking. "Whatever you're making." "A memory box," I said. "For your mother. To keep at her grave." His smile faltered. "Oh, that's nice, Dad." He backed toward the door. "I'll see you tomorrow." After he left, I sat in the quiet workshop, breathing in the smell of sawdust and wood stain. The box was nearly finished. Dovetailed corners, a fitted lid, the interior lined with felt. On the top, I was going to engrave a message. I hadn't decided what yet. My phone buzzed. "Robert, all documents ready for signature. Can you come in tomorrow at 2 p.m.? Bring Carol Harris if possible. I want her witness signature on the foundation paperwork." I texted back confirmation, then called Carol. She answered on the second ring. "Homer, is everything all right?" "Carol, I need a favor. Tomorrow afternoon, could you come with me to my attorney's office? I need a witness signature on some estate documents." There was a pause. "Estate documents? Homer, is this about Jason and the funeral?" "Yes." Another pause, longer this time. "I'll be there." "What time?" 2 o'clock, Frostbank Tower, 6th floor. "I'll meet you in the lobby." I hung up and looked at the box again. Tomorrow, I'd sign more documents. The day after, more still. Each signature another brick in the wall I was building between my son and his inheritance. The memory box sat on my workbench, waiting for its final touches. I picked up my engraving tool and began to carve words into the lid, each letter deliberate and permanent. Family is not blood, family is choice. When I finished, I ran my fingers over the words, feeling their truth settle into my bones. Jason had made his choice when he picked a wedding over a funeral. Ashley had made hers when she saw my wife as nothing more than an inconvenience, and I was making mine now. The box was beautiful, my best work in years. I'd place it at my wife's grave after the funeral, something meaningful and permanent to mark her memory. But I was building another kind of box, too. One made of legal documents and foundation bylaws and property transfers. A box that would close around Jason and Ashley on their wedding night, trapping them in the consequences of their own cruelty. I set down the engraving tool and checked my watch. Tomorrow at 2, I'd sign more papers. The day after, more still. And on the day of the funeral, While they danced at Lakeway Resort in their expensive clothes with their expensive friends, I'd signed the final documents that would seal everything in place. They thought they were planning a wedding. I was planning the lesson of their lives. And unlike their wedding, my plans would last forever. 2 days before the funeral, I drove to Harris Memorial Services to finalize the arrangements. The morning was cool, the kind of Texas spring day my wife had loved. Clear sky, gentle breeze, temperature hovering around 70 degrees. I parked in front of the funeral home and sat for a moment, gathering myself. Inside, Carol Harris was waiting in her office. Carol was 61, had owned the funeral home for 20 years, and had known my wife through the Austin Community Arts Program. They'd served on the same charity board for 5 years. When I called to arrange the funeral, Carol had been one of the few people who seemed genuinely devastated by the loss. "Homer," she said softly, rising to hug me, "how are you holding up?" "I'm managing." I set my briefcase on her desk. "Everything ready for Saturday?" "Yes. The service is scheduled for 10 in the morning. I've arranged the flowers you requested, white roses and lilies. The program is printed. The cemetery plot is prepared." She hesitated. "Homer, I have to ask, is your family really not coming?" I met her eyes. "No, Carol, they're not coming. They have a wedding to attend." Her face tightened with anger. "On the same day as the funeral? I don't even have words for that." "I do, but they're not appropriate for a funeral home." I opened my briefcase. "Carol, I need to ask you a favor. A legal favor." She looked puzzled. "Legal?" I pulled out the folder of documents Robert had prepared. "I need a witness for some estate paperwork. It's perfectly legal. Texas law allows notarization and witnessing at any location, including funeral homes. I need someone who can testify, if asked, that I was of sound mind, acting of my own free will and under no duress." Carol's expression shifted from confusion to understanding. "This is about Jason, isn't it? What he's doing to you. This is about making sure my wife's memory is honored properly, and ensuring that people who value weddings over funerals understand the consequences of their priorities." She studied me for a long moment. "What do you need me to do?" "After the funeral service, I need you to witness my signature on the final version of my will and the transfer documents for my charitable foundation. Robert Mitchell will be here. He's handling the legal work. Virginia Porter from Austin First Bank will be the second witness. You'd be the third. When you say final version, I'm leaving Jason $50,000. Everything else goes to the Coleman Family Charitable Foundation, which will support families dealing with cancer, like my wife dealt with cancer. Like Jason should have dealt with his mother's cancer instead of planning a wedding." Carol's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded firmly. "I'll be there. And Homer? Good for you. That boy needs to learn that family means more than money. He's about to get a very expensive education on that subject." After leaving Carol's office, I drove home, but I took the long way, driving past the places my wife and I had loved. The coffee shop where we'd had our first date, the park where we'd walked every Sunday morning, the art gallery where she'd volunteered. Austin was full of ghosts now, memories of a life I'd thought was solid, but had turned out to be built on sand. When I finally pulled into the driveway, Jason and Ashley's car was gone. Good. I needed time alone to finish the final preparations. In my workshop, the memory box sat completed on the workbench. The cherry wood gleamed, the dovetail joints perfect, the engraving clear. Family is not blood. Family is choice. I ran my hand over the smooth surface, then placed my wife's favorite photograph inside. The two of us on our 25th anniversary, standing on the beach in Galveston, her head on my shoulder, both of us laughing at something long forgotten. I closed the lid gently. My phone buzzed. "Ashley." "Homer, we're moving to the hotel tonight for the wedding prep. The rehearsal dinner is tomorrow evening. You're not invited. It's just wedding party and immediate family. See you after the honeymoon." I read it twice. "See you after the honeymoon." As if I'd still be sitting here, waiting for them to return, ready to sign over my house and business like a good little father who knew his place. I texted back, "Have a wonderful evening." Then I opened my briefcase and reviewed the timeline one final time. Tomorrow evening, while they were at their rehearsal dinner, I'd be finalizing the last financial transfers with Virginia. The next morning, during the funeral, I'd sign the final documents with Robert and Carol. By noon, everything would be filed, notarized, and completely irrevocable. By 9 that evening, while they were celebrating at the reception, the notification emails would hit their inboxes like a series of legal bombs. The beauty of it was its simplicity. Everything I was doing was perfectly legal. A person has the absolute right to dispose of their property during their lifetime. The foundation was legitimate, would do genuine good in the community, and couldn't be challenged. Jason could hire the best lawyers in Texas, and they'd all tell him the same thing. His father had the legal right to give away every penny while still alive. That evening, I heard them moving around upstairs, packing for the hotel. Ashley's voice drifted down, bright and excited. "Make sure you pack the blue tie and the cufflinks my father gave you." Jason responded with something I couldn't hear, but his tone was happy, relaxed, completely unburdened by grief or guilt or any awareness that his world was about to shift on its axis. They came downstairs around 7, both dressed casually but expensively, pulling matching designer luggage. Ashley wore white jeans and a silk blouse. Jason had on the kind of sweater that costs more than most people's weekly groceries. "We're heading out, Dad," Jason said, not quite meeting my eyes. "The hotel is holding our rooms." I looked up from the newspaper I'd been pretending to read. "The funeral is at 10 in the morning, at Harris Memorial Services." Ashley's smile never wavered. "We know, Homer. But like we said, it's our wedding day. We have to be at Lakeway Resort by noon for photos. There's just no way to make the timing work." "I understand," I said calmly. "You've made your priorities clear." Jason shifted uncomfortably. "Dad, don't be like that. We'll visit Mom's grave next week. We'll bring flowers and everything." Next week, after the honeymoon. After the Instagram posts and the thank you cards and the first blissful days of married life. When visiting your mother's grave was convenient. "I hope you have a beautiful wedding, Jason." Something in my tone made him pause. "You're okay, right? You're not going to do anything weird?" Weird. Like changing my will and transferring all my assets to a charitable foundation. That kind of weird? "I'm fine, son, just tired, grieving. You understand." Ashley was already at the door. "Come on, Jason, we need to get to the hotel. The wedding coordinator is meeting us at 8. Jason hesitated, looking at me with something that might have been concern or might have been guilt. "Okay. Well, we'll see you in a few weeks, I guess, after the honeymoon." "Actually, Jason, I think we'll be seeing each other much sooner than that." He frowned. "What do you mean?" I smiled. For the first time in 3 weeks, I smiled genuinely. "You'll understand soon enough. Enjoy your rehearsal dinner." They left, pulling their expensive luggage across the hardwood floors of my house, the house that would belong to the foundation by this time tomorrow. I watched through the window as they loaded their car, laughing about something, completely carefree. The house felt different once they were gone, lighter, like a weight had been lifted. I walked through the rooms slowly, remembering how it had been before Jason and Ashley took over. The master bedroom that had been mine and my wife's for 30 years, the office where I'd built my business, the kitchen where we'd cooked together every Sunday. All of it would still be mine, technically. As lifetime trustee of the foundation, I'd maintain complete control. But it would no longer be Jason's inheritance. It would never be the showcase he and Ashley had planned to create. In my workshop, I picked up the memory box and carried it to my car. Tomorrow morning, I'd place it at my wife's grave. Tomorrow afternoon, while Jason and Ashley cut their cake and danced their first dance, I'd return to this empty house and wait. Wait for the notifications to arrive. Wait for the phone calls. Wait for the moment when they finally understood that the old man they'd dismissed, the grieving widower they'd found so inconvenient, the father they'd relegated to a guest room in his own house, that man had been 3 steps ahead of them the entire time. I sat in my workshop one last time, surrounded by sawdust and the smell of wood stain. My tools hung on their designated hooks. My projects sat in various stages of completion, everything in its place, everything organized and controlled, just like my revenge. The morning of the funeral, I woke at dawn. The house was silent in that particular way that houses are when you're completely alone. Not peaceful exactly, but expectant, waiting. I dressed carefully in my dark suit, the one I'd worn to my daughter's graduation 20 years ago, back when Jason was still someone I recognized, the tie my wife had given me for our 40th anniversary, the cufflinks that had belonged to my father. I drove to Harris Memorial Services at 9, an hour early. The morning was bright and clear, exactly the kind of day my wife would have wanted. Carol was already there, directing the placement of flowers in the chapel. "Homer," she said quietly, "the ceremony will be beautiful, I promise." "Thank you, Carol." Robert arrived at 9:30, carrying his briefcase filled with the final documents. Virginia Porter came 10 minutes later, her expression somber and professional. And scattered throughout the next 20 minutes, 5 elderly couples arrived, friends from my wife's cancer support group, people who'd actually cared about her, who'd visited during the hard months, who'd sat with us in waiting rooms and held our hands through the worst of it. 10 o'clock came. The service began. I sat in the front row looking at my wife's casket covered in white roses, and behind me stretched 8 empty chairs, reserved for family, for Jason, Ashley, Richard, Patricia, and the wedding party that should have been a funeral party. 8 empty chairs that screamed louder than any eulogy. During the service, my phone vibrated. I glanced at the screen. Jason. "Dad, the wedding is starting in 4 hours. Can't believe this day is finally here." I turned the phone off and slipped it into my pocket. After the brief service, after the readings and the music my wife had chosen years ago, we moved to a small conference room at the back of the funeral home. Robert spread the documents across the table with practiced efficiency. "This is it," he said quietly. "The final will, leaving Jason $50,000 cash, with the remainder of your estate passing to the Coleman Family Charitable Foundation. The foundation transfer documents, making it official owner of all property and assets. The power of attorney assignments, everything." Carol and Virginia stood as witnesses, both understanding the gravity of what they were observing. "Just to be clear," Robert said, "once these are signed and filed, they're irrevocable. Jason will have no legal grounds to contest. The foundation will own everything. You'll maintain control as lifetime trustee, but upon your death, everything passes to charity. Jason gets his $50,000, and not a penny more." "I understand completely," I said. "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." I signed. Robert notarized. Carol and Virginia witnessed. Each document received the same treatment. Signature, seal, witness, done. The stack grew smaller as the legal protections grew stronger. "Finished," Robert finally said. He checked his watch. "It's 11:30. I'll file these electronically within the hour. The county recorder's office will have the deed transfer by 1 p.m. The bank transfers will complete by 2 p.m. I've programmed the notification emails to send at 9 p.m. tonight, right about when their reception should be in full swing." "Perfect," I said. Carol touched my arm. "Homer, are you sure you don't want to tell him before the wedding? Give him a chance to..." "To what? Apologize? Beg? Try to manipulate me into changing my mind?" I shook my head. He made his choice when he scheduled his wedding on his mother's funeral. Now he gets to live with the consequences. Virginia nodded approvingly. Sometimes people need to learn lessons the hard way. We buried my wife at 1 p.m. The cemetery was quiet, the grass green from recent rain. I placed the memory box at the base of her headstone, and the handful of us who'd actually cared about her said our final goodbyes. By 2 p.m., I was home. The house felt enormous and empty, but it was my emptiness now, not Jason's. I made coffee and sat in my office, watching the clock on my phone. At 2:45, a text arrived from someone at the wedding, one of my wife's friends who Jason had invited, not knowing she'd come to the funeral. A photograph of the reception venue. Jason and Ashley stood under an elaborate flower arch, both radiant, smiling like they'd never been happier. The caption read, "Beautiful ceremony. They look so in love." I stared at the photo, at my son who should have been burying his mother, but was instead cutting a 5-tier cake. At Ashley, who'd dismissed my wife as inconvenient, but was now posing for pictures that would go in albums and on walls. I set a timer on my phone. 6 hours and 15 minutes until 9 p.m. The afternoon stretched out. I tried to read, couldn't focus. Tried to watch television, couldn't sit still. Finally, I went back to my workshop and started sanding a piece of oak, just for something to do with my hands. More photos arrived throughout the afternoon. The first dance, the toasts, Jason's face flushed with champagne and happiness, Ashley's designer dress catching the light. The Lakeway Resort looked spectacular. $340,000 worth of spectacular. 5 p.m. 4 hours to go. 6 p.m. 3 hours. 7 p.m. 2 hours until their world shifted. At 8:30, my phone rang. "Robert, everything's filed and processed," he said. "The notifications are queued. At 9 p.m. exactly, they'll receive emails from the bank, from the county recorder's office, from my firm, and from the foundation. All at once. The subject lines alone will probably give him a heart attack. Good. Homer, last chance. Are you absolutely? I've never been more certain of anything. All right. Then justice is about to be served. I'll call you tomorrow to see how it went." I hung up and checked the timer. 1 hour and 28 minutes. I made myself dinner, leftover casserole that one of my wife's friends had brought, ate mechanically, tasting nothing, cleaned the kitchen, checked the timer. 1 hour and 4 minutes. Sat in my office, pulled out the photograph of my wife, whispered, "I'm sorry if this isn't what you would have wanted, but he chose a wedding over your funeral. Some lessons have to be learned the hard way." The timer reached 0 at exactly 9 p.m. I imagined the scene. Jason and Ashley on the dance floor at Lakeway Resort, surrounded by 200 guests, the band playing, champagne flowing, everything perfect and beautiful and expensive. Then Jason's phone buzzing. Once, twice, 3 times, 10 times. I picked up my phone and unmuted it. Waited. At 9:03 it started. 47 calls in 30 minutes. I let every single one go to voicemail. Watched the screen light up with Jason's name, over and over and over. At 9:35, I finally answered. "What did you do?" Jason's voice was barely human, a shriek of panic and fury. "Dad, what the hell did you do?" I kept my voice calm, almost pleasant. "Hello, Jason. How's the wedding? The house, the accounts, the business. I just got emails saying—" He was hyperventilating. "You transferred everything? To a foundation? What foundation? When did you— How could you—" "I had a funeral to attend today," I said calmly. "Where were you?" "Don't—" His voice cracked. "Dad, please, this is insane. You can't just—" "Actually, Jason, I can. Texas law is very clear. A person can dispose of their property however they wish during their lifetime. I disposed of mine. To a charitable foundation that will help families dealing with cancer. Families like ours. Families that stick together during hard times." I could hear Ashley screaming in the background. Could hear other voices, confusion, chaos. But you can't. That's my inheritance. That's our future. The house, the business, everything." "Was your inheritance," I corrected, "until you made it very clear that Instagram photos were more important than your mother's funeral. We can fix this," he said desperately. "We'll come over right now. We'll talk. We'll figure something out. Dad, please." "Jason, I'm tired. I buried my wife today, alone, while you ate cake and danced and celebrated. So no, we won't figure something out. You made your choice. Now, live with it." "Dad!" I hung up. The phone immediately started ringing again. I turned it off, set it on my desk, and leaned back in my chair. In the silence of my house, secured forever against their greed, I felt something I hadn't felt since my wife died. Peace. Not happiness. Not satisfaction exactly. But the deep, bone-tired peace of knowing that justice, cold and legal and absolutely irrevocable, had finally been served. Tomorrow, Jason would hire lawyers. They'd pore over every document, looking for loopholes that didn't exist. They'd rage and threaten and plead. But tonight, right now, in this moment, I sat in my workshop surrounded by sawdust and wood shavings and the smell of honest work, and I allowed myself one small smile. The wedding was over, but the real lesson was just beginning. The next morning I woke to silence. No frantic knocking on the door, no Jason screaming through the windows. Just peaceful, blessed silence. I made coffee and sat in my kitchen, the kitchen that was now owned by the Coleman Family Charitable Foundation, but controlled by me as lifetime trustee. Technically different, functionally the same. The irony would have made my wife laugh. My phone, which I'd turned back on after my morning shower, immediately erupted with notifications. Texts, voicemails, missed calls, all from Jason. I scrolled through them, reading the progression from panic to rage to desperation. 2:47 a.m. Dad, please call me back. This is serious. 3:15 a.m. I don't understand what's happening. 4:33 a.m. Ashley's parents are threatening to sue you. 5:02 a.m. We need to talk right now. 6:41 a.m. Please, Dad, I'm begging you. I deleted them all and poured another cup of coffee. Around 9, my doorbell rang. I looked through the window and saw Jason's car in the driveway, the BMW he'd bought with money from our joint account, back when he'd had access to our joint account. He was standing on the porch, still wearing his wedding suit from the night before, looking like he hadn't slept. Ashley sat in the passenger seat, her face buried in her hands. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. Dad! His voice was hoarse, destroyed. Please, we need to talk. I believe we talked last night, extensively. You can't do this. You can't just... He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized from his childhood, when he was stressed about a test or a baseball game. The house, the business, everything. You transferred everything? Yes. To a foundation? The Coleman Family Charitable Foundation. It will support families dealing with cancer. Families who actually support each other through difficult times. Families who don't schedule weddings on funeral days. His face crumpled. I know, okay? I know it was wrong. But Dad, this is insane. You're destroying my entire future over one mistake. One mistake? I kept my voice level. Jason, you moved into my house and treated me like a guest. You pushed your dying mother into a smaller bedroom. You counted down the days until you could inherit. You scheduled your wedding on her funeral and told me she wouldn't know the difference because she was already gone. Ashley convinced me, don't. My voice turned sharp. Don't blame your wife for your choices. You're a grown man. You made the decision. Now you live with it. Behind him, Ashley got out of the car. Her makeup was smeared, her designer dress wrinkled. The perfect Instagram bride had become a nightmare. Mr. Coleman, she said, her voice shaking, please, you have to understand. We didn't mean to hurt you. The wedding was planned for so long, we couldn't just cancel it. The deposits alone were $340,000. And how are you planning to pay for that wedding? I asked calmly, since the joint account is closed and your husband no longer has access to the family money. Her face went white. We used credit cards. Jason's parents would... She stopped, realizing what she'd said. Your money. You thought I'd die soon and you'd inherit everything. So you spent money you didn't have, confident that Daddy's money would cover it, eventually. I looked at Jason. Tell me, did you factor in funeral costs when you were planning your wedding budget? Or were you assuming I'd handle that too? Jason's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. No sound came out. We can fix this, Ashley said desperately. We'll move back in. We'll take care of you. We'll be a family again. Just please, please, reverse the foundation transfer. I can't reverse it even if I wanted to. That's what irrevocable means. The foundation owns everything now. I'm simply the trustee who manages it. Then resign as trustee. Ashley's voice rose to a shriek. Make Jason the trustee. Give him control. I almost laughed. The foundation bylaws specify that I'm the sole trustee for life. Upon my death, control passes to a board of directors I've already appointed. Carol Harris from the funeral home, Robert Mitchell, my attorney, and 3 directors from Austin Cancer Support Services. None of them are named Coleman. Jason sank onto the porch steps, his head in his hands. I've lost everything. No, I corrected. You still have $50,000 coming to you from my will. That's more than many people start with. You also have your job, your education, and your new wife. You haven't lost everything. You've just lost the inheritance you never earned. Ashley turned on Jason, her perfect mask finally shattering. You said he was controllable. You said he was too old and too sad to fight back. You said we'd have everything after he died, and he could die any day at his age. The words hung in the air like poison, Jason looked up, horrified. Ashley, stop! But she couldn't stop. The pressure of the night, the lost money, the destroyed plans, it all came pouring out. I married you for the house, for the business, for the life we were supposed to have, not for some $50,000 consolation prize and a mountain of wedding debt. The silence that followed was absolute. Jason stared at his wife of less than 24 hours, as if seeing her for the first time. You married me for money? Of course I did. Tears were streaming down her face, ruining what was left of her makeup. Why else would I marry someone like you? My parents have real money. I could have had anyone. But you kept talking about the house and the business and the inheritance, and it seemed like such a good investment. Investment. She'd called their marriage an investment. Jason stood slowly, swaying slightly. He looked at me, then at Ashley, then back at me. Dad, You should go, I said quietly. Both of you. You're not welcome here. Please. Jason, I buried your mother yesterday, alone, while you danced at your wedding, while your new wife, who apparently married you for money that you no longer have, smiled for photographers. There is nothing you can say that will fix this. Nothing you can do that will undo what you've done. So go. Go back to your hotel, pack your things, and figure out how to pay for the wedding you insisted on having. He stood there, tears running down his face, and for a moment I saw the little boy who used to run to me after school, the son who'd hugged his mother and promised to make her proud. Then Ashley grabbed his arm. Come on. We need to call Marcus Thompson. Dad's lawyer. He'll know what to do. Marcus Thompson? I knew the name, an aggressive attorney who specialized in estate disputes. They'd already planned their legal strategy. Probably started researching lawyers the moment they got the notification emails. Call whoever you want, I said. Spend whatever you don't have on legal fees. It won't change anything. The documents are filed, notarized, and completely legal. Texas law is on my side. But Shar wastes more money, trying to prove otherwise. I stepped back inside and closed the door, locked it. Through the window, I watched Jason and Ashley return to their car. Watched them sit there for 10 minutes, arguing. Watched Ashley's face twist with rage and disappointment. Watched Jason slump lower and lower in the driver's seat. Finally, they drove away. I called Robert. I assume you've had visitors, he said without preamble. How did you know? Because Marcus Thompson called me an hour ago, threatening to file suit for undue influence, mental incompetence, and fraud. I told him to go ahead and waste his client's money. Every document was prepared by a licensed attorney, witnessed by 3 credible witnesses, notarized according to Texas law, and filed with all proper authorities. There's no case. Will he try anyway? Oh, absolutely. He'll file something, probably a motion to freeze the assets pending investigation. It'll cost Jason $25,000 just for the filing. The judge will dismiss it, probably within a week, but Thompson will get paid regardless. Good, I said. And I meant it. Let Jason pay for lawyers who couldn't help him. Let him drain his credit cards trying to undo what couldn't be undone. Every dollar he wasted was a dollar he'd earned through his own choices. How are you holding up? Robert asked. Better than I expected. I thought I'd feel guilty, but I don't. I feel peaceful. That's justice, Robert said. Real justice. Not revenge. Consequence. He made his choices. Now he gets to live with them. After we hung up, I sat in my office and did something I hadn't done in weeks. I smiled. Really smiled. The kind of smile that comes from deep satisfaction, from knowing you've done the right thing, even when the right thing is hard. My wife's photograph sat on my desk, and I picked it up. He's going to fight, I told her. He's going to hire lawyers and make threats, and try everything to break the foundation. But it won't work. I made sure of that. I'm sorry if this isn't what you would have wanted. But he chose a wedding over your funeral, and some lessons can only be learned the hard way. The photograph didn't answer, of course, but I like to think she understood. 4 days after the wedding, Marcus Thompson filed his lawsuit. The petition was 40 pages of legal theatrics, claiming I was mentally incompetent, that I'd been unduly influenced, that the foundation was fraudulent, that Jason deserved his rightful inheritance. Robert called me the moment he received it. It's garbage, pure theater. But it'll tie things up in court for a bit. How long? Judge will probably dismiss within 2 weeks, but Thompson knows that. He's just milking Jason for legal fees. Let him. The real damage wasn't the lawsuit. It was what happened around it. Word spread fast in Austin. The legal filing was public record, and within days, everyone knew. Homer Coleman's son had skipped his mother's funeral for his own wedding, and the father had responded by cutting him out of the inheritance completely. The story spread through the real estate community like wildfire. Jason's reputation as a financial consultant collapsed overnight. Who would trust their money to a man who'd valued a party over his mother's funeral, who'd been outmaneuvered by his own father, who was now suing that father in a desperate attempt to reclaim money he'd never earned? I heard through mutual acquaintances that Jason had lost 3 major clients in the first week, then 5 more. His firm had quietly suggested he take a temporary leave of absence. Corporate speak, for you're toxic, please disappear. Ashley's parents, the Stewarts, had their own problems. Their social circle, the wealthy Austin elite, had turned on them. Patricia Stewart had been quietly uninvited from her regular charity lunches. Richard found his business contacts suddenly unavailable for golf. The message was clear. You raised a daughter who treated a grieving widower like an ATM, and we don't associate with people like that. 5 days after the wedding, Ashley filed for annulment, claiming fraud. She argued that Jason had misrepresented his financial situation. The irony was spectacular. She'd married him for money, discovered there was no money, and now wanted to pretend the marriage never happened. Jason called me that night. I didn't answer, but I listened to the voicemail. Dad! His voice was broken, barely audible. Ashley's leaving. Her parents hired a lawyer. They're saying I tricked her into marriage, that I promised her a life I couldn't deliver. The wedding still isn't paid for. We owe the venue, the caterers, everyone. My credit cards are maxed. The firm put me on leave. My clients are gone. I'm losing everything. Pause. I know you don't care. I know this is what you wanted. But Dad, I'm your son. Doesn't that mean anything? I deleted the voicemail. The next day, Jason and Ashley showed up at the house again. This time, they had a locksmith with them. I watched from my office window as Jason explained to the locksmith that this was his house, that his father had illegally locked him out, that he needed access immediately. The locksmith, a middle-aged man in work coveralls, looked skeptical. Sir, I need to see proof of ownership before I can change any locks. My father owned it, but I'm his son. I live here. Do you have a deed? A lease? Any legal document showing you have rights to this property? Jason's face flushed. No, but then I can't help you. This would be breaking and entering. Ashley stepped forward. We'll pay you double your usual rate. The locksmith packed up his tools. Ma'am, I'm not going to jail for a domestic dispute. You folks need to sort this out in court. He got in his truck and drove away. I opened the front door. Jason whirled around. You called him, didn't you? You told him not to help us. I didn't call anyone. He's simply a professional who understands the law. I held up a folder. This is the official notice from the Coleman Family Charitable Foundation, which owns this property. It states that Jason Coleman and Ashley Coleman are not residents, not tenants, and have no legal right to access. Any attempt to enter will be treated as trespassing and prosecuted accordingly. This is insane? Ashley shrieked. You're insane. This is our house. No, I said calmly. This is the foundation's house. I live here as trustee. You don't live here at all. You made that choice when you moved to the hotel for your wedding and never came back. Jason stepped closer. Dad, please. We have nowhere to go. The hotel kicked us out. We can't pay the bill. Ashley's parents won't let her come home. My apartment lease ended 3 months ago when I moved in here. We're homeless. You're not homeless. You're temporarily without housing. There's a difference. And there are resources available. Shelters, assistance programs, friends who might help. Friends? Jason laughed bitterly. I don't have friends anymore. You've made sure of that. Everyone knows what happened. Everyone's talking about how I skipped Mom's funeral, how I got cut out of the inheritance. I'm a joke in this city. You made yourself a joke, Jason. I simply enforced consequences. Ashley grabbed Jason's arm. Come on. We're wasting our time. Marcus said we should try to get a temporary restraining order against him force him to give us access while the lawsuit proceeds. Good luck with that, I said, since I've broken no laws, made no threats, and simply exercised my legal right to control property I legally manage. They left, Ashley practically dragging Jason to the car. I watched them drive away, wondering how long it would take before they gave up entirely. 2 days later, Marcus Thompson called Robert directly. "My clients are willing to settle," Thompson said. Robert had me on speakerphone. "They'll drop the lawsuit in exchange for $150,000 in the house." Robert laughed. "Counteroffer? They get nothing, and they pay their own legal fees, which I'm estimating are already around $25,000 and climbing. Their family? They're relatives who chose a wedding over a funeral. There's a difference. No settlement. Tell your clients to find jobs and start rebuilding their lives without money they never earned." Thompson hung up. 3 days later, the judge dismissed the lawsuit, exactly as Robert had predicted. The ruling was scathing. The plaintiff has failed to provide any evidence of incompetence, undue influence, or fraud. A person has the absolute legal right to dispose of their property as they see fit during their lifetime. The fact that the plaintiff disagrees with his father's choices does not constitute grounds for legal intervention. Lawsuit dismissed with prejudice. Plaintiff is responsible for all court costs. Court costs, another $8,000 Jason didn't have. I sat in my workshop that evening working on a new project, a small table my wife had wanted for years, but I'd never gotten around to building. The wood was mahogany, rich and dark. The joints were precise. The work was meditative. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You've destroyed my life. I hope you're happy." I recognized Jason's tone even through text. I typed back, "I didn't destroy your life, Jason. I removed myself as your safety net. Everything that happened after that was your own doing. You chose the wedding. You chose to spend money you didn't have. You chose to trust a woman who married you for money. Those were your choices. These are your consequences." No response. I set down the phone and returned to my table. Outside, Austin was settling into evening, the sky turning pink and orange, the temperature dropping to something comfortable, the city lights beginning to twinkle in the distance. Somewhere out there, Jason and Ashley were figuring out how to survive without the inheritance they'd counted on. Somewhere out there, they were learning that actions have consequences, that family means more than money, and that you can't schedule a wedding on your mother's funeral without paying a price. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt exactly what Robert had described, the deep satisfaction of watching justice unfold, consequence by consequence, choice by choice. The table was coming together beautifully. My wife would have loved it, and that, I decided, was enough. The weeks that followed were a slow-motion collapse, and I watched every moment with detached interest. Jason's annulment from Ashley went through quickly. When you can prove your spouse married you under false pretenses, specifically that you had money, Texas courts move fast. Ashley walked away with nothing. Her parents refused to help after spending $30,000 on failed lawsuits against me. She moved to Dallas, working as a receptionist. The Instagram influencer life was over. Jason's firm let him go 2 weeks after the wedding. All 15 clients left. $3 million in managed assets gone. Word spread in the financial world. Jason Coleman couldn't manage his own family, couldn't see through a gold digger, got outmaneuvered by his 67-year-old father. Not exactly inspiring confidence. The wedding bills kept coming. Venue, $85,000. Catering, $43,000. Photographer, $12,000. Flowers, $18,000. Every vendor sued or demanded payment plans Jason couldn't afford. His credit collapsed within a month. I learned this through Robert and Virginia at the bank, who saw Jason's desperate attempts to open accounts, apply for loans, anything to stay afloat. "He's drowning," Robert said over coffee. "And he did it to himself?" "Yes," I said simply. 3 weeks after the wedding, a letter arrived from Margaret, my wife's friend. She'd seen Jason at the grocery store buying ramen, looking terrible. When she spoke to him, he broke down crying in aisle 7, saying he'd lost everything and finally understood what he'd done. I read it 3 times, then set it aside. Understanding doesn't undo actions. Regret doesn't resurrect the dead. Later that week, Jason appeared at my door. Different this time. Not demanding, not angry, just hollow. "I'm not here to ask for anything," he said. "I needed you to know I understand now. What I did, what I lost, what I threw away." I didn't invite him in, but didn't close the door. I got a job in Houston. Insurance claims. $42,000 a year. Renting a room for $500 a month. Sold my car. Bought a used Honda. Paying off the wedding debts $50 at a time. "Good," I said. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know I'm not the same person who scheduled a wedding on Mom's funeral day. I'm trying to be someone she'd be proud of, even if it's too late." He turned to leave, then stopped. "The foundation, what you're doing with Mom's money, helping cancer families, it's beautiful. She would have loved it." After he left, I stood in the doorway for a long time. Part of me, the part that remembered the 7-year-old who loved chocolate cookies, felt something that might have been sadness, but it was buried under layers of betrayal. Empty funeral chairs, a wife buried alone. Maybe someday that part would grow large enough to forgive, but not today. I returned to my workshop and finished the table I'd been building. Precise joints, smooth finish, sturdy enough to last generations. I'd give it to Carol for the funeral home's consultation room. 3 weeks later, Virginia called. Jason came in to close his accounts. He's leaving Austin permanently, moving to Houston. He asked me to tell you he's sorry. "Thank you, Virginia. Are you okay?" I thought about it. My wife was dead. My son had betrayed everything. My family was broken. But I sat in a house I controlled, managing a foundation helping hundreds, surrounded by friends I'd chosen. "Yes," I said, "I'm okay." And I was. Not happy, but at peace. Justice served. Consequences delivered. Lesson learned, even if too late. That evening, I pulled out photos from Jason's childhood. The bike rides, the baseball games, family vacations. I looked at them not with anger, but with quiet acceptance that the past cannot be reclaimed. I placed them in a box, sealed it, put it in the attic. Not thrown away, not cruel, but archived, preserved but not displayed. Then I picked up the memory box I'd built for my wife, feeling the weight of cherry wood, seeing my reflection in the glossy finish. Tomorrow, I'd take it to the cemetery. Tomorrow, I'd sit with her. But tonight, I sat in my house, my foundation's house, and felt something I hadn't felt since she died. Contentment. The revenge was complete. The justice served. The consequences delivered. And I was still standing. 2 months after the wedding, I held the first board meeting of the Coleman Family Charitable Foundation at Harris Memorial Services. Present were myself as chairman, Carol Harris, Robert Mitchell, and 3 directors from Austin Cancer Support Services. Dr. Patricia Wong, who'd treated my wife, Michael Rivera, a lymphoma survivor, and Sarah Chen, whose daughter beat leukemia. "Our first order is approving grant distributions," I announced. $120,000 to 3 families in treatment. The Martinez family, father with pancreatic cancer, facing eviction. We'd cover 6 months' rent and copays. The Johnson family, single mother with breast cancer, drowning in debt. $15,000 toward bills and childcare during treatment. The Williams family, teenager with leukemia, savings exhausted. We'd cover experimental treatment. The board approved unanimously. Money went out the next day. Within a week, 3 thank you cards arrived. Mrs. Martinez wrote, "You saved our family. We were about to lose everything. Now my husband can focus on getting better. We will never forget this kindness." That letter stayed on my desk. Whenever I felt conflicted about Jason, I'd read it and remember, this is what family money should do. The following week, a reporter from the Austin American-Statesman called about a feature on local philanthropists. Robert convinced me the foundation needs visibility. The interview happened in my living room. The reporter asked about my wife's battle, the foundation's mission, and carefully, "Your son wasn't at the funeral. Is he involved?" "No," I said simply. "My son made certain choices. The foundation represents different values." The article ran Sunday front page. Austin philanthropist creates foundation to honor wife's memory. It mentioned the funeral family hadn't attended, the foundation's mission the families helped. It didn't name Jason, but Austin knew. Within days, donations poured in. $20, $50, $100 from people moved by the story. Within a month, 43,000 in unsolicited donations arrived. Jason's reputation became toxic, the son who chose a wedding over his mother's funeral. Austin society made its judgment clear. In early May, Jason's final letter arrived. Dad, I'm not asking for forgiveness or money. I just want you to know I finally understand. Too late, but I understand. Mom deserved better. You deserved better. I was a monster who thought I deserved things I hadn't earned. The foundation is beautiful. She would be so proud. I hope someday I can be someone she'd be proud of, too. I'm sorry. Not because I lost the money, I deserved that, but because I lost you, and I earned that, too. Jason. I read it twice, then placed it in my desk drawer. Not thrown away, not displayed. Just acknowledged. Perhaps someday I'd respond. Perhaps not. Either way, justice had been served. That week I visited my wife's grave with flowers and the memory box. I placed it at her headstone, engraved words facing up. Family is not blood. Family is choice. I sat in the grass. I did it, I told her. The foundation's helping families. Your memory is making a difference. A breeze stirred the trees. I like to think it was her, approving. Jason understands now. Too late, but he understands. I don't know if I'll forgive him. Maybe someday. But today I'm at peace knowing justice was served. I stayed until sunset, then drove home where Carol and Robert waited for coffee. They'd become my real family, the family I chose. As I pulled up, I saw them through the window, Carol laughing at something Robert said. Good people, honest people, people who stood by me. Inside, Carol handed me coffee. Homer, another donation came in. $10,000, anonymous. The note said, for families who actually take care of each other. I smiled genuinely. Let's put it to good use. That evening, planning how to help more families, I felt something settle in my chest. Not happiness, that would take time, but satisfaction, peace, the contentment of knowing I'd done the right thing. Jason lost his inheritance, but I gained something more valuable. I'd honored my wife's memory properly, taught a lesson that needed teaching, created something lasting from grief and betrayal. The foundation would continue. Families would be helped. And somewhere in Houston, Jason was learning to build a life on merit instead of inheritance. Looking at my wife's photograph, I felt her approval, not for punishing Jason, but for turning pain into purpose. I raised my coffee in silent toast. To her, to justice, to consequences, to hard lessons that shape us. The wedding was over, the inheritance gone, the family broken, but justice had won. Not through forgiveness, but through the simple truth that actions have consequences, and sometimes the best revenge is living well, while helping others do the same. I smiled at the photograph, then joined Carol and Robert in the kitchen. There was work to do, families to help, a foundation to build, and for the first time in months, I was genuinely looking forward to tomorrow. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.